Meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 38 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Human Resources, Skills, Social Development, and the Status of Persons with Disabilities. Today's meeting is in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of June 23, 2022. Members attending in person in the room and remotely using Zoom application. To ensure an orderly meeting, I would like to take a few minutes for the benefits of the witnesses and members. Before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name. For those participating virtually, please use the raised hand function. Before speaking, click on the microphone icon to activate your own mic. When you are done speaking, please mute yourself to minimize interference. For those in the room, if you wish to speak, please raise your hand. Your microphone will be controlled by the verification officer. The clerk and I will manage speaking order. You may speak in the official language of your choice, and interpretation services are available for the meeting. If translation services are lost, please get my attention. We'll suspend while they're corrected. I would also like to remind members no screenshots are allowed. And should any technical issues arise, please advise me and we may need to suspend to correct them. Before we begin today, I would like to ask that we have consent of the committee to proceed with the election of the first vice chair. Mr. Aitchison.
Thank you, Mr. I'm not sure how this process works exactly. Could I get some advice? Because I have an idea for someone for the first vice chair. If I'm just to propose that now, I'll do that.
Clerk, yes, speak to this.
Pursuant to Standing Order 1062, the first vice chair must be a member of the official opposition. I'm now prepared to receive motions for the first vice chair.
Opposition wants to move at this time, or we can deal with it on Monday at the next meeting. It's totally your discretion. Monday? So if you want to deal with it on Monday, then that's fine. Thank you. We'll deal with that agenda item on Monday. Thank you, Madam Falk. Does that address Mr. Uris? Okay. Bill C-215, an act to amend the Employment Insurance Act. Pursuant to order of reference of Wednesday, June the 15th, 2022, the committee will resume its study of Bill C-215, an act to amend the Employment Insurance Act. I would like to inform all members that the witnesses appearing today are virtually, and they have concluded the technical test and interpretation services are okay to proceed. I would like to welcome our witnesses to begin our discussion with 5 minutes of opening remarks. And the witness today are the officials of the Department of Employment and Social Development, Madame Mika Nandi, Director General, Employment Insurance Policy, Skills and Employment Branch, and Benoit Cadeau, Director, Special Benefits, Employment Insurance Policy, Skills and Employment Branch. You will have 5 minutes for your opening remarks. It's my understanding that Mr. Cadeau will provide the opening 5-minute statements. Mr. Cadeau, you have the floor.
Great, thank you. Welcome, everybody, and good afternoon. My name is Benoit Cadeau. I'm the Director for Employment Insurance Special Benefits Policy at Employment and Social Development Canada. Today, I'm joined by my colleague, Mona Nandi, who's the Director General of Employment Insurance Policy at ESDC. Comme vous le savez peut-être.
As you may know, in June 2021, as part of the 2021 Budget Implementation Act No. 1, Parliament approved an extension to EI sickness benefits. This extension increases from 15 to 26 weeks the maximum number of weeks payable under EI sickness benefits to employed workers, including registered self-employed workers, when they are unable to work due to an illness, injury, or quarantine. This extension is scheduled to come into effect by the end of 2022. An exact date will be announced later this fall.
Is a labor market program designed to provide short-term income support to workers during temporary absences from work. A key objective of the EI program is to support labor market reintegration, and it is designed with the expectation that claimants will return to work after interruptions resulting from life events or job loss. In this context, EI sickness benefits are designed to complement other supports available to workers in cases of longer-term illnesses, such as employer-provided benefits and longer-term disability supports. Roughly 1/3 of EI claimants use all 15 weeks currently available under EI sickness benefits. Out of this number, close to half do not return to work following their sickness leave. Most of those who do return to work do so within 10 weeks after exhausting their benefits. Le projet de
Bill C-215, as presented, would amend the Employee Insurance Act to extend it to 52 weeks, the maximum number of weeks of EI sickness benefits that can be paid to an employed and self-employed worker when they are unable to work due to an illness, injury, or quarantine.
also contains coordinating amendments to ensure that if this bill should receive royal assent before or on the same day as the extension to 26 weeks comes into force, this bill would repeal the provisions related to the extension to 26 weeks so they don't come into force afterwards.
Finally, this bill does not specify a coming into force date. It is therefore implied that it would come into force upon receiving royal assent.
Monsieur Cadieux,
Thank you, Mr. Cadieux.
the floor for statements, beginning with Madame Falk for 6 minutes.
Very much, Chair, and thank you to the department for being here and being willing to answer questions. This committee has repeatedly heard that EI sickness benefits are wholly inadequate. This isn't a new thing. During a study done in this committee on EI modernization, we had heard that the benefits should be extended to about 50 weeks. And that was ultimately the recommendation given by this committee to the government and to the department. And we now know that the government has rejected that recommendation and is only wanting to extend the benefit up to 26 weeks. So in the department's consultations on EI modernization, were you able to identify support for the extension of sickness benefits to the 52 weeks?
Great, thank you for the question. As I mentioned, the results from the EI sickness benefit evaluation that was conducted in 2019 and published in 2020 indicate that claimants are much less likely to return to work after taking more than 26 weeks of leave. So that includes those who exhaust their 15 weeks of benefits. What the evaluation found is that 10 weeks afterwards, claimants are much less likely to return to work. And those that do tend to return within the 10 weeks after exhausting their 15 weeks of benefits. As such, extending sickness benefits to 50 or 52 weeks would provide additional income supports to many workers who may not be expected to return to work at all.
So, sorry, I just have limited time. Why did the government choose to or the department, go forward with the 26 weeks if there is that need for more? Especially since this committee had already made recommendations through previous studies that we should have more than 26 weeks, 52 weeks. Why is the department only going forward with the 26 weeks?
So that would be a question for your colleague, the Minister of ESD.
Department didn't get direction for what this committee recommended of the 52 weeks, only direction for the 26 weeks?
So maybe I can jump in there to add a little bit. So during the consultations on EI, we certainly received a significant amount of input to support increased access to EI benefits, including for claimants who, experience job loss or have experienced life events that require them to step away from work. And we're in the process of reviewing all of that input, to consider how to move forward with a plan for EI modernization.
So if the
as it
consultations aren't done and the department is still combing through recommendations, why is the department and the government going forward with 26 weeks as opposed to the 52 weeks that this committee had given the recommendation for? Just seems like we're putting the cart before the horse if we haven't gone through all the work beforehand but are coming out with 26 weeks.
So the commitment to increase the sickness benefits from 15 to 26 weeks was, as my colleague indicated, part of a Budget 2021 commitment. It was included as part of the Budget Implementation Act of 2021, which was approved by Parliament. And so further to that, we are proceeding with the work required to implement a sickness benefit extension from 15 to 26 weeks. At the same time, we continue work on supporting the modernization of EI through consultations that include, thematics of how to improve access and adequacy of the program for all claimants.
Did the department make the recommendation to the minister to only proceed with 26 weeks?
So I would say that recommendations made to the minister are confidential and are cabinet confidence. I cannot speak to what recommendations were made by the department to our minister.
Okay. And what is the date that Canadians will be able to access the 26 weeks?
So as mentioned by the minister earlier in the House of Commons, this extension will come into effect by the end of 2022. An exact date will be announced later this fall.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Falk. Now to Mr. Kazmierczak. And please, would you identify which one of the witnesses your questions are directed to? So.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to start off by saying thank you to Mr. Cadieux and Ms. Mandy as well for your extensive work last number of months on the EI modernization and the extensive consultations with Canadians that have taken place through a number of roundtables from coast to coast. So thank you so much for your work on that important initiative. Wanted to ask Mr. Cadieux a question. When was the last time that any extension to the EI sickness program was initiated?
Thank you for the question. So EI sickness benefits were never extended. So they have been 15 weeks since their introduction in 1971.
So this is the first major change, and the extension from 15 to 26 weeks is really the first change in over 50 years. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And how many Canadians in that extension from 15 to 26 weeks that again will be introduced by the end of this year, how many Canadians do we expect to benefit from this change?
It is expected that this extension will benefit approximately 169,000 claimants per year who will benefit from additional weeks of sickness benefits beyond the 15 weeks that is currently available.
That is absolutely a significant number for sure. We know that EI sickness benefits really is one of, there's other options that are available, avenues to support Canadians who have to take time off of work because they're sick. Can you talk about how other long-term disability supports, like the Canada Pension Plan disability, how does it complement, how does it work with EI sickness benefits? And can you maybe talk about what are the differences that underpin those two programs?
Great, thank you. Great question. So a lot of employers offer short and long-term disability coverage to their employees. Approximately 8 million workers in Canada are covered by such benefits, and those are the ones that we know that are covered and registered through the premium reduction program that the EI program offers. And so for most of these 8 million workers, those benefits are far more generous than the EI program. And so they often provide, they include paid sick days, paid sick leave, for example, is one type of those benefits. And they often provide the coverage up to 100% of that employee's salary. So those are often the first line of resort for employees who have to take time away from work because they're sick. After that, they can access EI sickness benefits for up to 15 and soon to be 26 weeks. And if they're still sick beyond that, a lot of these workers have access as well to long-term disability benefits or Canada Pension Plan disability benefits if they are unable to work for a very, very long period of time and they're unable to return to the labor market. They can then access, like I said, Canada Pension Plan disability benefits.
And so the EI sickness program really is meant to be a short-term program that maintains that connection to the labor force, whereas, for example, CPPD is meant for sort of long-term disability. Is that sort of correct?
That's exactly right. So EI sickness benefits tend to be viewed as a short-term benefits for temporary illnesses to give time to the workers to recover until they're able to get back to work. Whereas there's other benefits and supports available for longer-term illnesses for workers that require more time before they're able to return to work, or in cases where they're not able to return to work at all.
As well, obviously, COVID has sort of changed our thinking about illness and losing time away from work. How has COVID, how is COVID expected to impact sort of the EI sickness program? Have you given that some thought? And
so this is something
and also conversely, how extending the EI sickness program to 26 weeks may help Canadians that are, for example, experiencing long COVID and other symptoms.
Thank you for the question. So this is something that we're looking into. I would say that we don't have the data yet to really be able to say what impact long COVID has had on EI sickness benefit take-up, but certainly those that are unable to work due to long COVID could have access to EI sickness benefits. And with the extension to 26 weeks, they'll have access to up to half a year of income support in the case where they're unable to work due to long COVID. I would just add that there's also flexibilities that are built into EI sickness benefits that allow claimants to receive those 26 weeks of benefits within a 52-week benefit period. So the claimant who perhaps is able to return to work here and there, a few days a week, perhaps a week here and there, and gradually return to work can do so and can spread the use of their sickness benefits over a full year, allowing them to return to the labor force gradually.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kuzmicek. Madame Chabot, pour 6 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
For 6 minutes, please. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses. And With all due respect, of course, there's some questions that we won't be able to have complete clarification on because of, political stances. Have you made any recommendations with all of the bills that have been tabled over the last 50 years, with all the studies that have been provided concerning the number of weeks, information from scientists and experts on the number of weeks that it takes to recover from a serious illness or long-term illness? We often speak of cancer, but there are other types of illness as well. Studies show that it's on average 41 weeks for recovery. Before this program was set up, the PBO said that, we were still below this 41 weeks. And, we hear good things that a lot of workers have private insurance that are very generous. But in reality, usually these are people who are participating in these private insurances, and many people don't have private insurance. Those who are self-employed can participate in these types of private insurances, but the reality is that we're in 2022. We have so many studies that show us the reality of this situation, despite recommendations from committees and despite Bill 265 that was unanimously passed at this committee to bring the length up to 26 weeks. The government decided to stick with 26 weeks. In your opinion, at the department, with everything that you've heard, are you in agreement that 26 weeks will not meet all the needs of workers that participate in employment insurance? And are we abandoning a certain number of workers?
Donc, merci beaucoup pour la question.
So thank you very much for the question. What I'd like to say is that the number of weeks for 2021-2022, our most recent data, the average number of benefit weeks for sickness benefits was 9 weeks. That's for the average claimant receiving sickness benefits. Of all claimants who received benefits, 33%, so about 1/3, used the 15-week max for these benefits. So it's really for these Canadians that this extension to 26 weeks will be beneficial. They will be able to get additional weeks, so up to 11 additional weeks. So that's your perspective. There might be some things that you haven't noticed in the stats, because some people do go back to work before the 15 weeks in poor conditions, and their goal is to try and make up time so that they can get more weeks. Sometimes people have cancer, they're going through chemo, and they have no choice but to go back to work. So I don't think that 26 weeks is enough. And the bill that we're studying now is 52 weeks. The last one was 50 weeks. Another question as well about the 26 weeks. Initially, this was announced for July. Now there are delays. What explains the delay of the coming into force of this 26 weeks? What explains this delay?
Merci pour la question. Donc, en effet,
So thank you for the question. Originally, the commitment was that this extension would be done in 2022, but because of the pandemic, there were temporary measures that were established to enhance and increase access to EI. So we wanted to do this earlier, before 2022, but it wasn't the case. There have been a lot of resources necessary in order to set up these measures, but also to meet the high demand, higher than normal demand that the government is facing. So this is what explains the delays in the deployment of this 26 weeks. So now it's been pushed back to the end of 2022.
Selon votre réponse, dans le
So according to this answer, basically now if we adopt this bill of 52 weeks, it seems that anything's possible. 52 weeks would be possible.
Donc, je dirais,
So I'd say that normally when there is a change to an EI program, it usually takes at least a year in order to implement the necessary changes to the system. This could include, for example, changing who is the systems responsible for different programs, but also training Service Canada agents, changing procedures, guides. So it takes a lot of work. And I would say that it's not as simple as simply changing one number.
Chabot
Thank you, Madam Chabot.
for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just wanted to just mention the important testimony that we heard earlier in the week. And it became fairly clear in that testimony that there is a gender lens to this work. So I have some questions just around gender lens and the study that was done and published in 2021, but also, you know, I have to think that in 1972 they weren't really thinking about putting a gender lens on this work. So my question, I guess, to Mr. Cadieux is around how the research was done, and was a gender lens applied in the study? And I would be interested specifically about what workers pivoted to after that 15 weeks and 10 weeks. They said they didn't necessarily come back. What did they pivot to? And was that data disaggregated by gender? And then my second question on the gender lens is, there's a note here in the brief that there was some Office of the Parliamentary Budget Officer sent some numbers forward, and I'm wondering, we know there's a significant pay gap in Canada as it relates to men and women, and I'm interested to know if there was a gender lens applied to that budgeting effort.
Great. So thank you for the question. Excellent question. There certainly was a gender lens. Now, I don't have all the data right in front of me to be able to answer the question and really break it down by gender. Perhaps this is something we can get back to the committee with a more fulsome answer.
Thank you. And so I'll just follow up on that question. A lot of what we heard about on Monday, and I know there's been a lot of testimony in relation to employment insurance over the time, did affect women and around the different kinds of cancers, but also to maternity, although there's also parental leave. So I just wanted to get an understanding of what came up in the study around being able to stack some of these benefits around life events, and it's been said today, life events that just tend to happen. And this bill is really saying, hey, we need 52 weeks for sickness alone. What kind of feedback you got around stackable for life events?
So certainly, as part of the consultations that recently concluded, this was a topic that we've heard quite a bit of feedback on. Participants certainly indicated that there was a need for flexibility in the ability to combine different types of benefits together, especially when multiple life events occur in close succession. Currently, up to 50 weeks of EI benefits can be combined when regular and special benefits are accessed in close succession. There are certain circumstances when it's only EI special benefits that are accessed, that up to 104 weeks can be accessed.
So can I ask, when the information comes back around gender, can you also add this one? I'd be interested to know on that feedback for stackable or other life events, if there was a gender lens you could apply to that too, where we could see women, gender diverse, and men, the data. That would be great. Thank you very much. How much?
I can just perhaps add quickly that in general for EI sickness benefits, 56% of women or 56% of claimants are women versus 44% are men. Those are the stats I have with me right now, but certainly we can provide additional statistics to properly respond to your question.
So then that brings another question in my mind. So in 1972, what were the stats of women and men in the workforce? I'd be so interested to know where we started from in this EI when that information comes back. Okay, I think I'm probably still got 2 minutes. So just wanted to ask a little bit around, like, we have labor shortages that we've studied in this community, or this committee. We're talking about labor shortages. So I just wanted to have an understanding of, was there any data modeling done around whether the 15 weeks, the 26 weeks, the 52 weeks gave us the best opportunity to get folks back to work healthy and happy?
Right. So like I mentioned, approximately 33% of claimants currently exhaust their 15 weeks of benefits. Amongst those, what the evaluation in 2019 demonstrated was that close to half, so about 45%, never returned to work afterwards. And those that did return to work, the vast majority returned to work within the first 10 weeks after exhausting their 15 weeks of benefits. So certainly an extension to 26 weeks would help that group of claimants that are, I guess, most likely to return to work shortly after exhausting their 15 weeks of benefits. Any extension beyond 26 weeks, for example, an extension to 50 or 52 weeks, would certainly provide support to additional claimants, but a lot of these claimants are individuals that unfortunately would not be likely to return to the labor market.
Data, okay, that's fine. Thank you.
We'll begin with Ms. Ferrari for 5 minutes. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses. I'm just going to back up a little bit because I just want to sort out a few questions I have. I'm new to HUMA, and thank you for having me. Recently appointed as Shadow Minister as well to Families, Children, and Social Development. And so, Mr. Cadeau, is that how I pronounce your last name? Director for Employment Insurance Special Benefits Policy at Employment and Social Development Canada. You had referred earlier that the question that my colleague asked in terms of why it wasn't, the recommendation of 52 weeks wasn't extended, go back to the Minister of ESDC. I'm a little confused as to which minister that is, because when we look at the mandate letters, there's 4 ministers and 4 parliamentary secretaries. So who are you saying that we should be asking?
Thank you. So, I mean, my response was really to say that a lot of these decisions were political decisions. So at the end of the day, you would have to direct your question to the minister responsible for the EI program, which is Minister Qualtrough.
Minister Qualtrough. So I'm just going to read you under the mandate letter for Minister Gould. It says, as the minister responsible for Service Canada, lead the development and implementation of modern, resilient, secure, and reliable services and benefit delivery systems for Canadians and ensure those services and benefits reach all Canadians regardless of where they live. So wouldn't you also say that that would be Minister Gould?
So Minister Qualtrough is responsible for the policy of the EI program. So any questions regarding policy questions would have to be directed to her.
So, and we had a very powerful witness here in HUMA this week who has been working on this for 13 years. Herself went through health issues. She's been told by all levels of government, all ministers, that this has been approved, and yet 13 years later, we're still in this same holding pattern. Can you tell us why?
I'm not sure I understand the reference to the 13 years later. Could you perhaps elaborate on that?
For sure. So she started an organization, 15 Weeks is Not Enough, and has been advocating for 13 years to extend the EI benefits from 15 weeks to 52 weeks.
So, I mean, certainly I cannot speak to why it was not extended earlier. All I can say is that right now it is the proposal is to extend it to 26 weeks. I can't say why it would not have been extended earlier than that.
So can you clarify for me then, if you're the Director for Employment Insurance Special Benefits Policy at Employment and Social Development Canada, why you wouldn't know the answer, what the delay has been? What's your role then?
Certainly, there's a number of reasons why a government may choose to extend benefits or not. It is beyond certainly my decision to decide whether to extend beyond 15 weeks. I could not provide you an answer as to why the government of that day, I mean, multiple governments, were in place in those 13 years, why those governments chose to wait until now to extend sickness benefits.
For your answer, how much time do I have, Mr. Chair? Okay, thank you so much. I guess what's frustrating for Canadians watching at home is the lack of timely or targeted delivery of services that are promised. And then as taxpayers, where is the accountability? And I hear you saying that it's not you, it's the minister. And then, I would love to know your thoughts on where people should point their attention to, and where does the accountability fall when we're asking for something that everybody seems to agree on, and yet we're still sitting here in a holding pattern.
So perhaps I can jump in on this, Benoit, if that's okay, and just say thank you for the question. In terms of, we respond as officials to the priorities of governments of the day. In this case, when we're talking about the sickness extension from 15 to 26 weeks and the implementation of that extension, that is actually in response not only to a government commitment, but parliamentary, as I mentioned before, parliamentary approval of this, the additional weeks of sickness benefits to 26 weeks. And as we have indicated, we are, moving forward with implementing that commitment as quickly as possible before the end of the year. And that's what we are proceeding with, understanding that there is a proposal before this committee to further extend sickness benefits to 52 weeks under this bill.
Harari, that concludes your time. And now I believe to Mr. Long for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, colleagues. And Ms. Nandy, Mr. Cadieux, thank you very much for coming today and your work on this. I was surprised, Mr. Cadieux, when you were talking about, so the average draw was 9 weeks and 33% used 15 weeks. Can you just confirm that and elaborate, please?
That's correct. So the average number of weeks of EI sickness benefits used for somebody that used only EI sickness benefits was 9 weeks, and 33% of claimants used all 15 weeks available to them.
Has there been, is that, when you did that analysis, was that, what year was that?
This is 2020, 2021 data.
Okay, and has it changed? Has it increased? Has it stayed somewhat static?
So I would say that that fiscal year is a bit of a different type of year given the pandemic. So the data is perhaps not reflective of a normal year. In previous years, that percentage was slightly higher. So for example, I believe it was 36% in 2019, 2020. And so now in 2020, 2021, it's 33%.
Thank you. Can you just speak to, Ms. Nandy or Mr. Cadieux, what analysis has the department conducted which supports the increase in the maximum number of weeks of EI sickness to 26? What analysis did you do?
So to inform the extension or the extension to 26 weeks, certainly we looked at things like the results from the evaluation of EI sickness benefits. We've looked at consultations and feedback received from stakeholders and recommendations made by them. And we've looked at the annual data on the usage of EI sickness benefits as well to make a recommendation.
Thank you. Has the department compared potential impacts of 26 weeks compared to 52 weeks? Have you done an analysis on that?
Could you clarify what you mean by the impact?
Well, the financial impact.
Yeah, so the parliamentary budget officer did an estimate and estimated that an extension to 52 weeks would cost approximately $1.9 billion per year ongoing. This compares to roughly $1 billion for an extension to 26 weeks.
Thank you. A lot of illnesses, I guess, could be classified as somewhat intermittent. For example, I don't hide it. You know, when I was in my 20s and 30s, which was 100 years ago, I suffered greatly from panic attacks and anxiety, and I obviously didn't have them continually. I would have them in periods. So, can you just speak to the benefits of the 26-week program and how the flexibility would be built into the system that would help somebody like me?
Sure, of course. So there's two ways that the program provides some flexibility for those with episodic or intermittent illnesses. The first one is claimants have the ability to work while on claim, while they're claiming EI sickness benefits, and they for any for example, a claimant can return to their job, throughout the week, even though they're claiming benefits. For example, if they are looking to reintegrate slowly back into the workforce. The second way is that those 26 weeks of EI sickness benefits can be received over a 52-week benefit period. So a claimant does not have to take all 26 weeks consecutively. They can, if they're ready to start going back to work, they can go back to work 1 week, take benefits if they're unable to work another week later, and then ease back into the workplace that way.
Ms. Nandy, can you comment on what the department's plans are to actually inform Canadians of these new measures?
Thank you for the question. When as I mentioned, there was the legislative amendments that are necessary to implement the change from 50 to 26 weeks was approved through Budget 2021. What it also indicated is that there would be a coming into force date determined by Governor and Council. And so when that date is determined, there would be notification to Canadians as to the implementation of these benefits. And as we said, the plan is to have them implemented by the end of the year.
Madame Chabot pour 2 minutes et demi.
2 minutes. Would you agree with me in saying that some people need more than 15, more than 26 weeks before they're able to get back into the workforce?
Merci pour la question.
Thank you for this question. Like I mentioned earlier, there are other support systems available for claimants who are not able to return to work after 15 or 26 weeks. I mentioned some of these benefits already. So, for example, long-term benefits are offered to numerous employees throughout Canada. That's one option. So, again, for those who need more time before able to go back, they're able to go back to work. Sorry, I only have 2 minutes. You said that 33% use 15 weeks. It's because they're burnt out, right? They may have needed more. There are those who maybe didn't return to work afterwards. There are humans behind these statistics. And I respect your opinions. The way I see it is that when we speak of increasing sickness benefits, extending their length up until 50 or 52 weeks, we're taking for granted the fact that everyone will not necessarily be using them, but it's also taking for granted the fact that people do need this. This could be for episodic illnesses or more severe illnesses. And these are individuals that do hope to go back to work, and these are people who participate in these EI programs. Thank you.
Answer. Was that a question, Madame Chabot?
So the statistics say that 33% use 15 weeks. What happens afterwards? I'm sure it's not everyone who goes back to work. There are lots of situations where after 15 weeks, there's nothing. In Quebec, this nothing is social assistance.
Merci, Madame Chabot.
Thank you, Ms. Chabot.
We'll now go to Madame Zarillo for 2.5 minutes. Madame Zarillo, you have the floor.
Madame Chabot's passion today, because we've heard too many stories of people that have lost their homes, their life savings, as well as losing family members. So this is, this is life or death for many people. I just wanted to go back to something that was came out in the study, just around easier access to EI benefits, easier to apply, more accessible, and even easier to access combined benefits because of successive life events. So I wonder, Mr. Cadieux, if you wouldn't mind sharing what modernization is coming by the end of the year around ease, around accessing benefits, and if it is going to become easier for everyone to be able, that needs it, to be able to access those benefits.
Thank you for the question. I would just say that the government has not announced yet its plan for the modernization of EI. This is something that will be announced later this year.
So now we're talking about, it's in the works to have a 26-week change by the end of the year, that there's going to be an increase to 26 weeks. There'll be no change in how to access those benefits, or no change in ease of accessibility. There'll be no change. Is that what you're saying?
Perhaps I can just jump in on that, if that's okay. So I think what my colleague, Mr. Cadieux, was trying to say is that the change with regards to an increase in sickness benefits to 26 weeks is on track to be implemented by the end of the year. In addition, the government has, as per its budget 2021 commitment, to support reforms to the EI program, conducted extensive consultations over the past 2 years, and those consultations will inform further modernization of the program that would respond to what we heard during those consultations about the importance of having, and improvements to access to the program, to adequacy of EI benefits for workers to ensure, including those workers who experience successive life events. So I think that's the part about modernization. But as Mr. Cadieux indicated, that work is ongoing to support reforms to the program, again, to be informed by all of what we heard during the consultations.
Thank you. So I'm just going to close out again on the gender lens. There is some discussion and some information here about the parliamentary budget officer, and I just wanted to reiterate that I would like to know what the formula was for these estimates, specifically around the 1.9 billion. Was there a gender lens applied? We know that women more often are in part-time employment, lower wages. So I just want to understand the formula that was used to come up with the estimates. That's it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So this is a question we'll have to come back to the committee on. We'll have to consult with our parliamentary budget officer colleagues.
That's the Vice, Madame Zarrillo. With that, then, given that we started late, I'm going to conclude the questioning round with witness, and we will suspend for a number of minutes as we prepare for clause-by-clause review of the bill. So we'll suspend for 5 minutes while we make the changes. We'll be joined by Legislative Council. Thank you, committee members. We will now begin the second hour, and we do have the ability to go the full hour if it's required. So before we begin clause by clause consideration, which we're moving to of the bill, I want to advise for the committee, we have to give notice to waive the 48-hour deadline for amendments. We only have amendments from the NDP, and because there's no independent members sit on the committee, we need a motion. We need a motion that the 48-hour notice to file amendments be waived. Do we have agreement? Thank you, then, committee members. So I would like to provide members of the committee with some instructions and a few comments on how the committee will proceed with the clause-by-clause consideration of Bill C-215. As the name indicates, this is an examination of all the clauses in the order in which they appear in the bill. I will call each clause successively, and each clause is subject to debate and a vote. If there are amendments to the clause in question, I will recognize the member proposing it, who may explain the amendment. The amendment will then be open for debate. When no further members wish to intervene, the amendment will be voted on. Amendments will be considered in the order in which they appear in the bill or in the package each member received from the clerk. Members should note that amendments must be submitted in writing to the clerk of the committee. The chair, as chair, will review slowly and allow all members to follow the proceedings properly. Amendments have been given an alphanumeric number in the top right corner, which I take all members of the committee have. And as I indicated, there's only been three amendments that have been received. Once there's no need for a seconder to move an amendment, once moved, you will need unanimous consent to withdraw an amendment. During debate on an amendment, members are permitted to move sub-amendments. These sub-amendments must be submitted in writing. They do not require the approval of the mover of the main amendment. Only one sub-amendment may be considered at a time, and that sub-amendment cannot be amended. When a sub-amendment is moved to an amendment, it is voted on first. Then another sub-amendment may be moved, or the committee may consider the main amendment and vote on it. Once every clause has been voted on, the committee will vote on the title and the bill itself, and an order to reprint the bill may be required if amendments are adopted, so that the House has a proper copy for use at report stage. Finally, the committee will have to order the chair to report the bill to the House. That report contains only the text of any adopted amendments as well as an indication of any deleted clauses. Again, I would like to welcome back to the committee the two officials from the department who you met in the first hour, so we'll not go through introductions there. You know who they are. But at this time, I'm going to ask the legislative clerks that are here with us that will address any of the legislative questions you may have to introduce themselves before we begin the clause-by-clause discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Emilie Tivierge. I'm one of the legislative clerks assigned to C-215. And I'm here with my colleague to assist the committee with the clause-by-clause consideration of the bill.
Bonjour, mon nom est Jean-François Pagé. Je suis ici.
Hello, I'm also here to help Emily.
So let's begin with I call Clause 1. Madame Zerillo? Oh, wait. Madame Zerillo, just give me a moment.
Président, les interprètes disent que c'est inaudible parce
It's inaudible because her mic is not on.
Yeah, Madame Shabat, is it audible now?
I think I'm there. Can you hear me? It's audible?
Audible? I would ask Madame Shabat to identify the amendment that she is speaking
Sure.
to.
So this is in clause 1. I have an amendment to this relates to basically the stackability. So on our testimony on Monday, it was actually quite powerful, the amount of feedback that I got after that testimony Monday from a lot of women that have experienced expiring their benefits in the past. So this amendment relates to that, and I want to thank this committee for the grace to be able to bring this amendment in such short notice based on that testimony on Monday. So that bill, in Bill C-215 in Clause 1, be amended by replacing line 6 on page 1 with the following. So it would be a C, despite subsection 12.6, because of a prescribed illness, injury, or quarantine. Yeah. You want me to do NDP 1?
As it comes first.
Okay, I thought that one did. I thought we were on clause 1.
Sorry, it is, but we're on NDP 1.
Okay.
Your first amendment, Madame Cirillo.
Okay. Okay. Just trying to go easiest first. So this one relates to parental or pregnancy benefits when we want to be able to have the full 52 weeks for sick benefit and not to have any deductions from your parental or your maternal. So you want me to read it? All right, so this is to amend by adding before line 4 on page 1 the following new clauses. 0.1, subsection 8.2 of the Employment Insurance Act is amended by striking out the word or at the end of paragraph C, by adding the word or at the end of paragraph D, and by adding the following after paragraph D. And for E, so that it would be E, receiving pregnancy or parental benefits or their equivalents from a provincial parental insurance plan. And then for 0.2, subsection 1010 of the Act is amended by striking out the word or at the end of the paragraph. C, by adding the word or at the end of the paragraph. And D, and by adding the following after paragraph D. And that's not in my printout, but oh, it is in the printout. E, in the receipt of pregnancy or parental benefits or their equivalents from a provincial parental insurance plan.
I have been advised by the legislative clerk that Bill C-215, and I'll give my ruling on this, C-215 amends paragraphs 12.3c and 152.141c of the Employment Insurance Act to increase from 15 to 52 the maximum number of weeks for which benefits can be paid because of illness, injury, or quarantine. The amendment seeks to amend subsection 8.2 and 1010 of the Act to add an additional ground of extending the qualifying period and the benefit period for persons in receipt of pregnancy or paternal benefits. As House of Commons Procedure and Practice, 3rd edition, states on page 772, since an amendment may not infringe upon the financial initiative of the Crown, it is inadmissible if it imposes a charge on the public treasury or if it extends the objectives or purposes or relaxes the conditions and qualifications specified in the royal recommendation. In the opinion of the chair, the amendment you propose seeks to amend sections of the Act that are not modified by Bill C-215, which is not procedurally allowed, and also proposes to broaden the grounds for extending the qualifying period and the benefit period to a new category of persons, which imposes a charge on the Treasury. Therefore, I rule the amendment inadmissible. Then we would move to, do we have to? Okay. Would you like to comment, Madame Zerl?
Thank you for that. And I guess one of the things that I wanted to bring up was, you know, today we did talk about the gender lens, and we did talk about the fact that in 1972 they weren't maybe not applying it, but also we didn't get confirmation that any of the budgetary estimates applied a gender lens. So I would argue that there might not be an increase. But the second thing I just wanted to talk about was that, you know, this bill, C-215, needs to be accompanied by a royal recommendation before it can receive third reading. And in the House of Commons, and voting that the bill would entail an increase in public spending in a way to an end that is not currently authorized. And it's my understanding that this bill itself has not yet received that royal recommendation. So I would challenge Mr. Chair, and I wonder if we could go to a vote.
To a vote. Madam Clerk, explain the significance of the vote and what's being asked.
The question is, shall the decision of the chair be sustained? If you agree with the chair's decision, you vote yes. If you disagree, you vote no. Mr. Long.
Yes.
Mr. Kuzmarchuk. Yes. Mr. Collins.
Yes.
Mr. Coteau.
Yes.
Mr. Van Bynen. Yes. Ms. Kuzi.
Yes.
Mr. Aitchison.
Yes.
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 Contre.
No.
Thank you, committee. We'll now move to clause 1, and that is, Madam Clerk, read it in. Okay. At this stage, Madame Zarrillo, do you want to move NDP Amendment 2?
That Bill C-215 in Clause 1 be amended by replacing line 6 on page 1 with the following. C, despite subsection 12.6, because of a prescribed illness, injury, or quarantine.
Zarrillo, again, Bill C-215 amends the Employment Insurance Act, and I have to read each one of these in its entirety. Bill C-215 amends the Employment Insurance Act by increasing from 15 to 52 the maximum number of weeks for which benefits can be paid in the event of an illness, injury, or quarantine. The amendment, NDP-2, seeks to prevent the total number of combined weeks of benefits in subsection 12.6 of the Act to be taken into account for benefits paid in the event of an illness, injury, or quarantine. As House of Commons Procedure and Practice, 3rd edition, states on page 772, since an amendment may not infringe upon the financial initiative of the Crown, it is inadmissible if it imposes a charge on the public treasury, or if it extends the objectives or purposes, or relaxes the conditions and qualifications specified in the royal recommendation. In the opinion of the Chair, the amendment aims to relax the conditions for the payment of benefits provided for in the Act, which requires a royal recommendation. Therefore, I rule the amendment NDP 2 inadmissible. Madame Cirillo?
I wasn't expecting that, Mr. Chair, but I will just reiterate that on the 5th of April 2022, the Deputy Speaker of the House of Commons ruled that Bill C-215 needs to be accompanied by a royal recommendation before it can receive third reading in the House of Commons, and voting that the bill would entail an increase in public spending in a way and to an end that is not currently authorized, and currently this bill has not realized that royal recommendation. I think there's opportunity to make amendments. Thank you.
Not subject for debate. It can only be challenged.
Mr. Chair, thank you. To a vote.
NDP Amendment 2 has been challenged. It would have to be on a point of order, Madame Chabot. We're going to a vote. There's no debate. My ruling has been challenged. My ruling has been challenged, which brings procedure to an immediate vote. Madam Clerk, call the vote and explain to the committee the vote.
Question is, shall the decision of the chair be sustained? If you agree, you vote yes. If you disagree, you vote no. Mr. Long?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Van Bynen?
Yes.
Ms. Cooley?
Yes.
Mr. Richardson?
Yes.
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 Contre?
Nope.
9 yeas, 2 nays.
Advises me we have to suspend for a moment. We have a microphone issue while we get clarified. So I'm going to suspend for a couple of minutes to correct. Madame Chabot?
Juste une question, Monsieur le Président.
Just a question, Mr. Chair. When I raised my hand a moment ago, are we ever allowed to debate your decisions to not receive what's been proposed? I wanted actually to understand better the decision, not debate it. On a procedural level, are we allowed to question your decision about them not being receivable? Or do we just go to a vote and it's finished? Just a question for the future.
Thanks, Madame Chabot, for clarifying. You can challenge my ruling but not debate it. It goes immediately to a vote. Thank you. With that, we can spend for a few minutes. We are having an issue with one of the microphones. Committee members, we will resume the technical issue. There was only one mic working in the room, which is causing an issue. Just for the clarification of the committee, my ruling is sustained, so we shall move to vote on shall Clause 1 carry. Carried? Shall Clause 1 carry? Carried?
Carried.
Clause 2 carried? NDP3, yeah, okay. Then the third and final amendment that we have before the committee is NDP 3 on Clause 2. Madame Cirillo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this is also in regards to being able to have some flexibility in the benefits based on other life events. So for this amendment, it's that Bill C-215 in Clause 2 be amended by replacing line 10 on page 1 with the following. C, despite subsection 12.6, because of a prescribed illness, injury, or quarantine. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Madam Zarillo, Bill C-215 amends the Employment Insurance Act by increasing from 15 to 52 the maximum number of weeks for which benefits can be paid in the event of an illness, injury, or quarantine. The amendment, NDP 3, seeks to prevent the total number of combined weeks of benefits in subsection 12.6 of the Act to be taken into account for benefits paid in the event of an illness, injury, or quarantine. As House of Commons Procedure and Practice 3rd edition states on page 772, since an amendment may not infringe upon the financial initiative of the Crown, it is inadmissible if it imposes a charge on the public treasury or if it extends the objects or purposes or relaxes the conditions and qualifications specified in the royal recommendation. In the opinion of the chair, the amendment aims to relax the conditions for the payment of benefits provided for in the Act, which requires a royal recommendation. Therefore, I rule this amendment inadmissible. Seeing no challenge to the chair's ruling.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr. Chair,
je comprends que je peux même pas expliquer pourquoi, parce que je comprends pas dans ce cas-là votre objection d'irrecevabilité, parce qu'il y a une concordance à faire. Vous entendez rien?
Why it's not received. Sorry, interpretation was not on. She stated that. Can you hear me? It's okay.
Je recommence.
I'll start again. I know that you explained earlier that there was no debate. In this situation, it seems coherent with the bill. And what I'm wondering is, why are you stating that it is not inadmissible?
Shabbat, again, according to procedure and precedent, the chair's ruling is not subject to debate. You can challenge it, and if there's a challenge, we go to a vote.
Je conteste.
I challenge it.
Clerk, call a vote on the chair's ruling of the amendment as being inadmissible.
The question is, shall the decision of the chair be sustained? If you agree, you vote yes. If you disagree, please vote no. Mr. Long.
Yes.
Mr. Kazmarechek. Mr. Collins. Mr. Coteau. Mr. Van Bynen.
Yes.
Ms. Kuzi.
Fun for a change. Yes.
Mr. Aitchison.
Yes.
Ms. Falk. Ms. Ferrari.
Yes.
Madame Shabbat.
Contre.
Ms. Cirillo. That's 9 yeas, 2 nays.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The chair's ruling has been upheld. And that is a conclusion of the amendments that have been submitted. Shall Clause 2 carry? Agreement? Clause 2 is carried. Shall Clause 3 carry? Clause 3 is carried. Shall the title carry? Yes. The title is carried. Shall the bill carry?
Recorded vote, please.
Fine. Madam Clerk, a recorded vote on the carrying of the bill. And there was no amendments.
Mr. Long.
Yes.
Mr. Kazmarechek?
Yes.
Mr. Collins? Mr. Coteau? Mr. Van Bynen? Ms. Kuzi?
Wait.
Mr. Aitchison?
Yes.
Ms. Falk? Yes. Ms. Ferrari?
Yes.
Madame Chabot?
Oui.
Ms. Cirillo?
Yes.
That's 11 yeas.
The bill is carried. Shall the chair report the bill to the House? Yes. Agreement? Consensus? The bill has been carried, the title has been carried, and the chair will report it to the House. Thank you, legislative clerks. We still have a few. A little bit of committee business. No, here. No, here. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Thank you to the legislative clerks. We still a couple of items I need direction from the committee on, and the witnesses can leave at this time. Thank you, Mr. Cadieux and Madame Nandy. Okay, I need adoption of the budget that we spent on reviewing Bill C-215 in the amount of $1,500. Do I have approval of the budget? It was 15 or? Oh, that's what you have. $7,800. Do we still have agreement? 70, or you'll have to cough up for the lunches you enjoyed when you were there. The budget for the committee reviewing C-215 was $7,850. Do we have approval? Yes. See consensus. Thank you. Now I just want Bill C-22, which is coming, the deadline for the submission of prioritized witness list to the clerk. So I'm reminding, did we pick a timeline on that, or do we want to give it now? This is on C-22, which was adopted in the House and will now come to the committee. So do you want to, the committee should make a decision on a deadline for submitting your witness list? Friday? Do you want to do this Friday at 5 o'clock, end of day? Eastern Standard? I see nodding of consensus. Okay, so the deadline for witnesses for Bill C-22 will be on Friday. Do we have a timeline? 5 o'clock Eastern Standard? Okay. The second part is the committee should decide or give direction on the total.
Thank you for asking.
Okay, the second one is the committee should give some direction on the total number of meetings to hear from witnesses. Could I receive some direction on the total number of meetings? Mr. My colleague, Eric, I'll call you.
Not a problem. I would maybe just suggest that the committee spend four meetings. Does that sound reasonable? 4 meetings.
You okay for? Okay, great. Super.
Okay, I'm seeing a consensus on Madame Cirillo.
On that, Mr. Chair, is there opportunity to extend to another meeting or even maybe 2 more meetings if we end up getting a rich amount of testimony that we need to dig into a little bit further? Is there an opportunity to? Okay.
To change his mind, Madame Cirillo. Yeah. So at this, there is a recommendation that we schedule for 4 meetings with witnesses. Okay. Would the committee like a briefing session before from department officials before we commence the study? You want to do it before, or what? Or you can do it after? What's Madame Zarrillo?
Just a question on when do we anticipate that we will commence with witnesses?
I'll ask the clerk to speak on that. We have a discussion. It looks like the earliest would be that we could begin the Bill C-22 would be October the 31st because of the timeline to notify the witness to get them in. Madam Clerk, do you want to just elaborate on that?
It'd be wonderful. We're giving witnesses a week. So if we receive witness lists by Friday at 5 o'clock, ideally I'd like to start getting invitations out on the Monday. And I would like to give witnesses time then to actually consider the invitations and prepare, because quite often we're not giving witnesses enough time to prepare and to do the opening statements. So it'd be helpful for those witnesses to give them time to actually review the invitation, make sure the equipment they require is there, ensure that we have interpretation on the floor, and to modify the rooms itself to accommodate all individuals, both public and witnesses.
Bott and Eric, and I would just remind the witnesses that we will be hearing do have challenges, so that's a requirement for the additional time. Madame Chabot.
Oui, monsieur.
Yes, so that is a question. And considering this, I'd like to know if we'll have the time to move forward with what you're suggesting. So a meeting with civil servants, a more technical meeting beforehand that would not reduce the number of meetings we'll have for witnesses. Is that possible next week? Because I don't think we don't have any other topics to study.
What's the wishes of the committee? We could schedule next Wednesday for officials to give a briefing on the bill if the committee wishes that. Do I see a consensus? So we will schedule next Wednesday for officials to come in and give a briefing on Bill C-22. Okay? The second part then that I want to is on Monday, which is the 24th. I would like to schedule beginning the first review of the labor report that you all have the copy of now. So if that's agreeable to the committee, that at the meeting on Monday, we would begin a review of the labor report the committee did that you had the first draft of. Oh, sorry. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yes, and actually, to the new members of the committee, the committee had studied a labor shortage, did a labor shortage report in the where we at last spring session, and that report first draft was provided to committee members 2 weeks ago, and we have yet to review that. So you have draft 1 of the committee's report on labor shortages. So I would, if I see a consensus, the committee will move to, on Monday, the 24th, to begin the review of draft 1 of the labor report, labor shortages report. Madame Kuzi?
My apologies, just to go back to the departmental briefing, would it be possible to have the minister return? I know just how passionate she is about this bill, and she's always, I think, very favorable in terms of expressing her excitement in her desire to see this passed rapidly. So I think it would be great to have her back at committee to share that with us once again. And I will say, as the official opposition, it might help us to address directly some of our concerns with the specifications so that we can all move it along faster. Just a consideration, Chair. Thank you.
Madame Kuzi, Eric.
Suggestion, if it's the will of the committee, I know that the minister is prepared to come and would like to come on the very first day of the study, if that's okay. So whether that, if the committee decides whether that's October 31st or November 2nd, the minister would like to appear and be the first witness, if that's okay.
That would be excellent. Thank you.
Minister to appear at the first as the study begins. It'll either be the 31st or the 2nd of November, depending on schedule. Do I see consensus on that? Seeing consensus, thank you, committee members. I just want to remind one is the deadline for applications for the Centennial Flame is October the 31st. Just a reminder, again, the deadline is 31st. With that, again, thank you, committee members, for your participation.
I've received inquiries by emails. I'm hoping to receive at least 2 more by the end of the deadline.
Oh, so we have 3 now.
Possibly 3. So I'm really encouraging to do the
Okay,
last
let's
final
see.
push before October 31st.
Stephanie, that's because of you.
Thank you, committee members. I move to adjourn.
That's a 200% increase.